We forget that we're only here for a short time, Neil. We forget that, we don't have infinite lives, that our days are numbered, and especially as you grow in your craft, as every year you get a little better at your craft, as another year you have less to use that craft and to say the things you want to say.
That's David duChemin, back for his second appearance on the show. A somewhat different approach to the show today, because as you listen to this, stand by, if you're listening on the day of release, Neil, you're good at this, you are. You read my mind, or the script. It's like you've learned the lines for the show, you have. If you're listening to this on the day of release, in a couple of hours, I will be returning from New York on the Queen Mary 2nd, 7 days-ish at sea, arriving back in port at Southampton, with, I hope, some good footage and excellent stories from 2 weeks away. 1 week on a west to east highway drive in the States, and then the crossing. Traveling with the former LA Times photographer and Pulitzer Prize winner, Marissa Roth. We will have some stories to tell. Or she will, definitely. It's been a sort of mission, really. A creative and life one, which I will share more about with you in the coming weeks. But I will say this, as all politicians say when they want to answer a question with something else, I will say this, I'm hoping for a smooth crossing. I'll let you know. It's strange doing these recordings in advance, it really is. Anyway, today a somewhat different approach, as I say. I needed to record some shows in advance. And for one of them, I asked our newish friend of the show, the amazing Canadian wildlife photographer and storyteller and tutor and mentor and so many other titles, David duChemin, if he'd try something out with me. La expérimente, he says in a pseudo-French accent for no reason whatsoever. The idea is that I wanted to ask a series of questions that weren't necessarily weaved together by theme, but could represent questions asked from or by a theatre audience on a night in conversation with David. So this really was my chance, or is my chance, to put the feelers out for an idea I have for some theatre talks. Neil, is this some sort of announcement? Not quite. It's a bit of I'm thinking aloud, like many of my ideas that I share with you. It's a concept that may involve somebody who appears reasonably often on these shows. And so this is a sort of pilot, an amuse-bouche of an idea bouncing around the plate, as it were. As to the title of the show today, well, I shall get to that in a moment.
Today on the Photowalk.
If you are not failing, you are not risking, you are not taking chances, and I would venture to say you're not learning. I have no less imposter syndrome after 40 years, but at least I'm getting better at recognizing it. Everyone says, you got to put mood into your, but how do you put mood into your photographs? I've been bankrupt and divorced. I've got my leg cut off. I have gone to all of these things as a result of my choices. The challenge is what leads us into new places. If it's not challenging, it's not new. You've done it before. Why repeat yourself?
That's David duChemin. Today, step into an imaginary theatre of the mind with us for a special Photowalk edition. In this audience with style of show, I invite David, world traveller, humanitarian photographer, award winner, author, longtime teacher of vision, to field more general questions about the craft and pastime of making photographs. With no script, no filter, we're going to explore everything from what makes a good photograph, which is not as easy as it sounds to answer, how to discover your personal voice, to why failure is often the spark for growth. Alongside stories of his photographic and life experiences, David's philosophy about creative courage, and the inevitable doubts every artist faces, I think this episode today offers quite an intimate glimpse into the mind behind the camera. Before we start, I'd like to thank our Patreons. Thank you. You don't have to thank everyone, Neil, or thank you, generally, because you show up week after week after week after week to support us in this endeavour. This show that has been here in one shape or another since 2020. 505 episodes in, and without your help, thank you, it's safe to say that you've been the wonderful why of this adventure. Hid. Every week there is an extra show available through Patreon, which this week covers the subject of travel and reflection. That's over on our Patreon channel, which you can reach through the orange button on the front of the website. Also in today's show, we'll have a reminder of the one-word assignment set by Liza Gershman. And of course, we have another thing that we're ending the year with called The One, which I'll tell you more about during the show too. So, even though this is a studio-based show today, many of us hopefully will still be walking with earpods in, etc., other flavours available. So, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee? Check. Garibaldi's? Check. Walking boots or shoes? Check. Some spare film perhaps, or an extra SD card if you're feeling prolific on the button today? Check. Well, let's walk. The letters, the emails, the messages you share are what make this community truly distinctive. Your reflections on walking and creativity and photography bring a pause from the world's noise as we head out together, covering ground and making pictures to remember the paths that we've walked. Whether your camera's a smartphone or a top-of-the-range ultra-zoom Lightroom 400, you're more than welcome on this walk together. And if you're not a photographer, but just like to amble with a world-curious bunch of people who do like to photograph, you're very welcome as well. The email address for the show is stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. So, a conversation today with David duChemin. The title of the show, as you know, is What Makes a Good Photograph? And the question is right at the start. I did actually type the question into Tinternet, as the great British comedian Peter Kay would say, and here's what it came up with. A good photograph makes you feel something, then pulls you back for a second look. It begins with intent, knowing what the frame is about, and relies on light, the moment, and the way things sit together. So that's what Tinternet said. I wonder what David will say. We've got a different kind of conversation today. I'm looking forward to experimenting with this, and who knows, maybe you and I will be meeting each other in a theatre for a night with. Here's David duChemin, back for his second appearance on this show. David, there's a real mixture of questions. I want you to feel like I've just popped you on stage. Well, you're no stranger to that, that's for sure. And that you've asked an audience of photographers to pop up their hands and ask what they want. Now, the only difference is it's going to be me in every single chair.
Brilliant. It'll be articulate, and it's going to be great.
It would be very weird to look out to an audience and just see me. Isn't there a film
it's the same guy every time.
Isn't there a John Malkovich film a bit like that, I think?
Aren't they all a bit like that?
They probably are, yeah. So we're going to start with, we were noodling over this in some email exchanges we were having. So I thought we'd start with this, because I'm thinking that I might title the show today, What Makes a Good Photograph? ? There's always somebody that will think, oh, yes, please help me with this. I need like a silver bullet question. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to roll through. That's a starter dish for many mentoring questions to come after it. So, come on, the big one. How do you personally define a good photograph? We'll start with an easy one.
Yeah, start with the easy one. Good. Let me start by saying this. I think some questions in life, many questions in life, the questions are more important than the answer. It's more important that we ask it than that we answer it definitively. It's like one and done. Here we go. We're going to answer it. It's because everyone wants something different from their photographs. Everyone wants a different feeling. Everyone is trying to accomplish something. Maybe it's, let me back up. If you ask the internet what makes a good a good photograph, you will come up with a reply that is technical in nature, that is a good photograph is sharp and well exposed. Maybe a little artistic, also well composed. Some will say a good photograph elicits a feeling. Others will say a good photograph must contain a story. which, I'm in agreement that a story can make a photograph good, can make it powerful, can make it resonant, but it doesn't. If I didn't set out to tell a story, if I set out instead to create a poem, a visual poem, like something abstract, something that's more, I'm losing my words here, but impressionistic or, abstract, then story has nothing to do with it. And in fact, sharpness may not have anything to do with it. And your traditional understanding of exposure may not. It may be more about color harmony. And so to blanket reply to such what could be a very insightful question with one answer and say, well, here's what it is. I think a good photograph does what the photographer sets out to accomplish. In one case, it may be a very emotive photograph. It may be something incredibly creative and artistic. In another, I have a photographer friend who he's a diver, and his life mission is to photograph every species of shark, which is when you think, and sharks and rays, and when you think about how many sharks, and I didn't even know, I had no clue, and he's been doing this for years, and he's, he might be closing in on his goal, but
I had a slightly nervous laugh for him as well, because
a little bit, most of them are quite small and hide in the mud, and his goal is not to create photographs that are artistic. He's not endeavoring to make something that feels, he's not incorporating motion, and he's not turning them into moody black and whites. And his goal with his photographs is to create something that is very illustrative, to create something that when you look at it, you say, oh, that is the, purple spotted epaulette shark from Malaysia or something.
So it's like a record shot then.
It's a document of record, and his goal in his photography is no less valid than my own. And a photojournalist may endeavor to create something that is very different than my own. And so what for them is a good photograph may be very different. And what I guess where I'm going with this and what I feel is important is that we need the freedom to be able to define good, which is such a moving target, on our own terms, especially as a beginner. For a beginning photographer, for you to define a good photograph the way I define it is to put yourself in an impossible situation, because I define good based on 40 years of experience and what has not worked for me, what I've tried and failed at, where I find my voice. It's a very different thing. For you as a beginner, a good photograph may just be the one where you finally pull off that 30th of a second panning shot with, with a running lion. Or it may be the one where you just finally figured out high contrast lighting, or you took a risk and you created something that's just finally you're like, I thought out of the box and I made something that just feels right and feels like mine. For a 40-year-old photographer to then look at that and say, man, that's not a good photograph. You got to have huge balls to say that, and a very small heart, I think.
I wonder if it's like a bag of golf clubs. So, and when you go into that bag, every single club does a different job. And if you are a photographer let's take weddings. So Sam, my wife, used to, when we had the times before COVID. Do you remember those days, David?
I do, vaguely. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
But we had a lot of our client meetings were here in the office. It's now turned into a podcast studio. But then it was a meeting room and a place to edit photographs. And one of my golf club that would have come out the bag would have been emotion. Because if I went back to the house, Sam would, or after a meeting, after I'd seen people off the premises, Sam would say to me, "Did they cry?" And I'd say, "Yeah." She'd say, "They'll buy." So it was, if they cry, they buy. Nice. That was the golf club. But it wouldn't be the golf club for a landscape photographer or somebody capturing every single shark known to this planet, would it? It would be very different. And I think the only difference is that, you're talking about which tool you use. I would take the analogy with the golf club further and say, look, if you, and I don't golf, so I take this with a grain of salt, but if you're looking to get your golf ball 80 meters onto the green and you do what
what otherwise would be a perfect 2-meter putt. That putt would have been perfect. But if what you're trying to accomplish is to get the thing onto the green, 200 feet away, no, not a good shot at all. So according to what the golfer is trying to accomplish, it's either a wild success or it's an abject failure. So I do think that we need to approach this with a focus on the individual. And I think the photographer that can determine that is the one that's making the photograph, and only the one that's making the photograph. After that, it's, a photographer that can look at my work and say, that's not a good picture. It's like, well, hey, you don't know what I'm trying to accomplish. Any more than if we look at, someone evaluating Picasso or Monet or a song. If they don't like heavy metal, they're going to be like, that is awful. That's not music, it's noise. And the person for whom heavy metal is their life is going to say, man, that's the best song ever. So I fully embrace this subjectivity of the whole thing and say, we really need to focus on what is the individual trying to accomplish and what are they trying to say? And then we can talk about whether it does or does not do that. But good is such a useless word in this, kind of conversation. It lacks utility.
I was looking for the holy grail then. Would you like an easier one? What does it mean to have an opinion in terms of your own photographs? Does it matter? Should it matter?
I think so. I was once asked, actually frequently asked while I was still doing humanitarian work, how I stayed objective about that work. And I always answered the same way, which was I not only did I never stay objective, I tried very hard not to be objective. I tried talk about did they cry? I would leave my assignment work every time I left a country that I was doing work in. At some point, I would lie in bed and, stare at the ceiling and tears would pool in my ears. And because I don't think that you can do that kind of work and not care. And if you truly care about something, you will have an opinion about how the work needs to be done, about how the subject needs to be portrayed, your perspective, your choice of POV, your choice of what you include, what you don't, the story itself, all of it will, I think, should come through. Yeah. I don't see a value, now setting aside journalism, but even there, I would say, how can you do journalism without being, I don't think the objectivity of journalism is actually a thing, because you always shoot from a certain, just talking technically, you always put your camera in a certain place and shoot a certain point of view. And you may say, well, that's just a technical decision, but you are by definition choosing what you show and what you do not. By your choice of moment, you're showing a bias as to what is important in that story and what is not. And so I'm very strongly in favor of the idea that we all have a voice, and that is partly what we choose to talk about photographically, and it's partly how we choose to say those things, your point of view, your choice of color as you're getting more artistic, whether you use, bright saturated tones or muted pastel palettes, all of these sorts of choices, they're part of your voice. And you cannot have a voice without having some sort of an opinion. Otherwise, you're just, I don't know, what are we doing if we don't have an opinion about these things?
I suppose you have to be careful of being too much of a self-critic, though.
Certainly.
Yeah, my cousin, who is an influencer, I know, don't look at me that way. She
Did you hear me roll my eyes?
I saw them. She will say she has she calls it the little shit on her shoulder that's constantly whispering in her ear that her work has got no better. And that's when it becomes really quite destructive, isn't it?
It can be. I think we have to listen to that little shit on the shoulder, because you can only by listening can you say, no, please off, or yes, you're kind of right about that, or that voice on my shoulder can be very paralyzing if I listen and obey. But if I listen and go, yeah, you're right, actually I could do better. Sometimes that voice on our shoulder is disarmingly honest if we listen to it and go, it can push you it can push you out of laziness. It can push you into better work. That voice sometimes on my shoulder is just like, man, you're repeating yourself. And I can choose to ignore that and just keep going, or I can be like, yeah, you know what? You're right. I am. So I don't always discount that, but it's a tightrope, walking that line and going, okay, is that voice legitimate, or do I need it to tell it to go pound sand? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I used to just say, yeah, you got to ignore that voice, but sometimes that voice is, especially with experience, and maybe that is the key. I mean, I have no less imposter syndrome after 40 years, but at least I'm getting better at recognizing it. At least I have a string of dubious victories behind me that I can point to and say, okay, well, I may be an imposter, but I'm a little less of an imposter today. Or the whole other side of that argument is, of course, I'm just making it up as I go. Of course, I'm faking it. We all are, because every day we're trying something new. And so the only ones that aren't imposters in this sense, the way I'm thinking about it, are the ones that just keep repeating themselves. And yeah, every day I wake up and that voice is like, do you really belong here? I'm like, let's find out.
It's been a real education, actually, David, as I've spoken to photographers across the last 5 years to find out that they do make stuff up as they go along. That actually when they go into a job, they didn't really know what they were doing. They were intimidated by the person or the subject that they were photographing. And they were constantly on the move in their mind of not actually really knowing what they were doing, but thinking, I'll work out as I go. And I didn't think any professionals did that. But it seems that even at the very highest levels, they do.
We all do. We are all bullshitters on some level. And I think it's because the creative spark, we want to bite off a little more than we can chew. Now, you have to be careful you don't bite off too much more and are so out of your depth that you can't pull it off. But biting off just enough that it's like, this is a bit of a challenge. It's in challenge that the flow comes from. Yeah. And I think that it elicits our best work. So I think most of us, if we're honest, are making it up as we go. Most of us are feeling a little, because of that, like, I am not sure that I belong. So again, that imposter syndrome, yes, it can be very destructive, but there's something in it too that is honest. And it's like, maybe we just need to acknowledge it and go, yeah, I am today. I'm just making it up. I am faking it but that's creativity. That's improvisation. That's jazz. And I don't think it's always all bad. And until you get into that self-destructive, I am a worm, and it stops you from creating anything at all. It stops you from taking risks, and you just sit in the basement and scroll through Instagram. There's a way to harness that fuel and make it fire an engine that's productive and not necessarily self-flagellating all the time. Most of the time, yes. And like the rest of you, I don't feel worthy half the time. But every now and then, those voices push me to better work.
Are you saying that for real? Do you believe that? Yeah,
probably. I think so.
Because if I were to look at your work, which I have, I've studied your work now, and we've had one conversation already, I would certainly never place you in this guy does not know what he's doing pile.
Oh, Neil, when I'm shooting, I swear to God, I'm very salty when I'm photographing. My muse and I have a very acrimonious relationship. When I'm photographing it, because I'm always trying that new thing, and new for me, it's not a new thing out there, but trying to combine so new combinations and slower shutter speeds and the animal's not behaving. And so by the time you this is the miracle of creativity and art making, is by the time you get to the piece and it's finished, when you look back on it, it's just it feels so inevitable. Well, of course I made that piece. Of course Springsteen wrote that song or whatever. But to go all the way back to the beginning and look at the messy process through which we make it. No, I mean, I look at my best work and I after a while, I start to believe my own PR and think, oh yeah, that's really, but I forget the 300 frames that it took me to get there, or the 3,000 frames. So yeah, I wrestle with, and I think I wrestle more with it now, Neil, because there's more to lose. I feel like, I should look and say, okay, well, I've got a couple books under my belt. I know this game. I've got to figure I can't lose. Of course I can lose. And I probably feel like I have more to lose now than the first book came out. It was like, well, my expectations were so low, Neil. I didn't expect to get anything except, maybe my mom will buy a copy. And now I'm like, God, she's bought so many copies. I do give her copies, but you kind of feel like this time, as you go along, the greater the odds that you're really going to screw it up. The greater the odds that this time so it's an inner game, and it's a balance between listening to those voices and disregarding them when they need to be disregarded, and listening to them and saying, is there anything in that criticism? Is it a part of my voice that's saying to me, hey, you're getting lazy, or you're mailing it in this time?
And David duChemin returns for more questions shortly. It's the Photowalk show of a Friday. If you're out with your cameras, I'd love to hear from you and see what you've been photographing, see the adventures that you've been on. The email address is stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. Send in any pictures, if you can, optimize them to 2,500 pixels. You are an absolute star. If not, don't worry, I'll do the heavy lifting. I'd like in 2026 to find a jingle for that. I'm sure somebody listening at the moment knows how to do that. Somebody musical. Somebody who can sing far better than I. Right, the one-word assignment. Here comes your challenge for this month. I will tell you how you can take part in a moment. It is set by Liza Gershman.
The Photowalk assignment.
Liza, a one-word assignment. What word? Now we're almost 2 years into these one-word assignments, so it's getting harder, I think, to find original words. What's yours? What's yours going to be?
Grounded.
Grounded. I suppose that plays quite nicely into your experiences of traveling the world, because I think during our interview, really, something that came across is your feeling of being grounded in these places. Is that what you mean by grounded? What other meanings could it have?
I like the idea of grounded as what we do to center ourselves and to create the best art that we can. Mm-hmm. So when I was a professor, I encouraged my students at the start of class every day, we did a meditation. Yes, I'm a California hippie. And so grounded, and then my connection to food, which would be grounded the earth, the land, actual grounding, the farmers that I'll be photographing very soon. Grounded is definitely what travel helps me feel, even though some people say it's an escape. I never feel more connected than when I'm traveling. So that's how I ground myself into humanity, is to travel and to look through a lens. So I think it's many, many different ways, but grounded, that's my word.
Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide if possible. Wide, that is, not just the long side, wide. All full res is fine, and I'll do the heavy lifting. A few thoughts about the image can help you tell the story on the show page, where we keep the pictures, or the assignments page where we hold the pictures. No watermarks, no borders, but do include a link to your social or your website. Full URL, please, so that I can share more of your work. Submissions go on the assignments page, and they may also feature on our Instagram, with a tag back to you, of course. Right, back to David duChemin for more of our conversation.
Critique or review. There's many words for it. Mentoring, review, critique. I'll give you an extreme example. I'm going to have to think of his name. Vincent Laforet, that was it. Long time ago when I interviewed Vincent Laforet. Yep. Mm-hmm. And he told me a story about his father. I do hope I've got the right name. I'm sure I have. Vincent told me a story about his father, who would, if you like, I'm air quoting here, train his son into what he felt were good photographs by taking a pile of his negatives that he didn't think were quite up to the job. He'd put them onto the table, and he'd drive some very sharp scissors all the way through them and say, these are not good, these ones are good. But the ones, so he'd have a very definite, that's rubbish, that was never an in-betweeny, There was, that's rubbish, and so much so that I'm going to decimate it with a sharp pair of scissors. Or those ones, a smaller pile there, son, is okay. Critique. Now, I've given you a very extreme example.
Wow.
But how important is critique, and can it be a good driver? Now, in Vincent Laforet's case, he's come out as a blooming good photographer and filmmaker.
Sure has.
But that could destroy a lot of people.
And the question, Neil, is did Vincent emerge from that experience a better photographer because of that experience or despite that experience? And I don't know that we ever can parse that out. As my father was a military man, he was very critical. He was a photographer. And much of my work he has looked at, and he was very literal, and he would look at it and say, yeah, I don't get it, especially if it was anything more creative, a little intentional camera movement, or he was not into the poetry of it. He wanted his images sharp and well exposed. How useful is, I think, critique, separate from the fact that the world is just going to judge you no matter what. If in the context of learning, in mentorship, I think critique needs to happen in conversation. I think photographers are very keen on, well, if I were doing this, I would have fill in the blank. And the problem is you're not doing it. You're on the bleachers, on the sidelines, and that photographer who is receiving your criticism, your critique, is probably trying to accomplish very different things. So my approach, and this is the only thing I can speak to, when I look at a student's work, I have to consider where they are at their, what stage in their growth as a craftsman and as an artist. I have to ask them point blank, what are you trying to accomplish with this? Because it may be a 10 out of 10 for you right now in your career. No, it's not 40 years from now. It will not be that 10 out of 10. But for now, what were you trying to accomplish? And did you nail it? And then once we've had that conversation, what other possibilities exist that might resonate with you that might have made this stronger? And or what things in the photograph do I feel like perhaps detract from what you were trying to accomplish? But without conversation, it gets reduced to, well, this is distracting. I hear that all the time. Well, this is distracting. Well, it actually may be a significant part of the photograph, like an out of focus foreground and the bokeh that's there. And what I would like to hear is, well, this element draws my eye away from what I believe is the intended subject. And have you considered that? Have you considered the way this bright spot changes the balance of the image? And is that what you were trying to accomplish? Did you want something that felt a little bit more dynamically balanced or more serene? Do you want that feeling of tension that I get in the photograph because that thing is so close to the edge? Or do you not? Again, without a conversation, it's very difficult. And it's one of the reasons I refuse to judge photo contests, because I don't think you can win at art. And I think most, if not all, competitions push us away from that subjectivity, that individual voice, and encourage a lack of individuality, encourage a homogenous approach to this. And everyone's kind of looking for, well, if I were making this photograph, and they're not listening to the photograph. They look at it, they react to it. And this is not to say that some competitions aren't good. It's not to say that some judges are not very thoughtful. Yeah. I don't mean that at all. It's why I don't do it, because I want to have that conversation.
I think as a judge, you have to have a set of rules that everybody's playing to, don't you? Really, I've just written something called "Painting Yourself into a Corner," which is actually a story about painting yourself into a corner in a studio when you were painting it white, which probably has nothing to do with this conversation. But you do kind of paint yourself into a corner when you're judging, don't you? Because if there are no sets of rules, then what's the criteria?
Exactly. And if there are sets of rules, then which rules? And are we so sure that those rules apply equally to everyone for what everyone is trying to accomplish? Yes. And I don't believe that. In fact, it's usually, and I would almost go on record as saying always, it is always the ones that break the rules that endure as art and are the strongest, have the strongest voice. If everyone does the same thing, then no one has a voice. Everyone's just painting with the same color, and it's a question of how thoroughly you covered your canvas with blue. Is that what we're interested in? I don't know. And again, I think the question is more important than the answer, and I don't want to get overly cynical about competitions. I don't think you can win at art. It's like winning at yoga. It's not, it's like, how do you judge that?
My Lotus is better than yours.
Precisely. I don't know, but how's your breathing? And I don't know. It all seems like so many adventures and missing the point to me.
Emotion is certainly a word we use a lot on this show. We talk about emotion a lot. I talk about emotion a lot. I'm quite a soft old sausage, really, so emotion plays a very big part in my photography and in my life. Here's a difficult question. What was the last photograph that made you cry? I will include, by the way, cinematography in this, because that might be easier to answer.
Setting aside for the minute that I never want to hear in an interview the words "soft old sausage," that did not escape my notice. I'm all flustered now. I'm the same way, Neil. I cry at just about anything, so it's actually very difficult for me to. I don't know that I can answer that, because not everything makes me cry. There's a lot of stuff I look at that's devoid of emotion, but I'm quite quick to cry or to laugh or to have a strong emotional response to things. Yeah. Offhand, I couldn't tell you. I would need some time to think about that.
What about a moment where you were making a photograph?
I don't cry when I'm making photographs. I sometimes will have a very strong emotion afterwards when I look back at the experience. I do find that when I'm in flow, when I'm really concentrating on things, that I go into a bit of a fugue state where it's just, me wrestling with the muse and, saying bad words. And that's not to say I'm not experiencing wonder. It's not to say that I'm divorced from the experience emotionally. But there's a task at hand, and so I work my way through it and almost sort of push that to a side, not to never be dealt with, but to be explored later, sometimes through the pictures, sometimes just through once I put the camera down, kind of finally taking a breath. But Don McCullen said, and I'm going to misquote this, but essentially he said, for me, photography is not seeing, it's feeling. And if you can't feel what you are looking at and photographing, then how do you expect others to feel the same way? And I think discussions about emotion are fewer and further between than I would like in photography. We so seldom talk about how everyone says, you got to put mood but how do you put mood into your photographs? How do you make people or imbue your photographs with a feeling? That's the domain of color harmonies and story and narrative. And there's so many tools that are part of that. Very few of them have anything to do with how sharp the image is. More of them have to do with how sharp the photographer is. Someone once said, there's a difference between exposing your sensor and exposing your soul. May have been me that said that. I'm not 100%. I'm nervous about quoting and attributing things because I've said these things so many times. But I think it's more important. The photographer that can truly expose their souls and do it well is rarer and more, I think, has greater impact and relevance than the photographer who has only learned to expose their sensor or their film, because that's hard. That's tough. Requiring photographers to be emotionally available, emotionally vulnerable in their work. That's a lot tougher than learning the Sunny 16 rule.
Kit. I've gone wildly left.
Way to zag on.
I've gone wildly left at this point. But let's talk about kit. Well, it kind of was connected to what you were talking about, because some people will hide behind the camera. It's a real shield, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be. Absolutely.
But that wasn't what I was going to ask, though. I was wondering how you might encourage photographers to move away from what I feel is becoming a hardware fixation toward developing their visual language more than their kit bag, perhaps. Is
Was it ever, though? Is that that really a change, or is it just that photography has become just so much more accessible and there are so many more gear manufacturers? And because I look back and I'm not sure that at 16, 40, almost 40 years ago, that I was any more or less gear focused. I think it's the price of admission. I think we need, when we first start with photography, very few people come in with the artistic, preference or their artistic leanings forward. I think they come in with I need to learn the technical stuff, because without the technical stuff, I can't express myself. And so you need to get fluent with the language. You need to, on some level, obsess with the gear, because otherwise, how are you going to actually learn it? It's just a question of, when you get to a certain point, do you have the foresight or the sensitivity, I don't know, to go, okay, I have learned enough of the craft. I'll continue to learn, but now I need to really focus on the artistry of it, what I have to say and how I'm going to say it. I don't know that anything has changed, but certainly it has always been a challenge. And I don't, but it's not insurmountable. It wasn't insurmountable when I was a kid. Back then I was learning about, the chemicals and the film stock, and there was, and optical filters, and there was a whole different expression of that technical obsession. But I pored over magazines and looked at the Leicas and the Nikon F3 at the time. I still do. I still want to get one and put it on my desk. I will never use it, but it was the camera I wanted, and I've got the Hasselblad. Don't use that one either. I've got all those, because they meant something. They're almost like icons to me and symbols. And I think it's important for photographers not to, I'm the guy that I in my first book, I wrote, gear is good, vision is better. And everyone took that to mean screw vision or screw gear, vision's everything. I'm like, no, the gear is important. You need to learn it. And I love my cameras as much as anyone else, but they're insufficient. They do not do the thing that I want them to do without a lot of input from myself. So maybe that's the way we get through it, is to want something more than just sharp and well exposed. When you get to that point, does it really satisfy? Well, for a while, because for a while you couldn't get it sharp. You couldn't get it well exposed. And then at a certain point, it becomes comfortable and it becomes an extension of yourself. And it's like, okay, now it's time. I figured out how to use the microphone. Now I can focus more on the song. And I think when you get to that, it's a turning point. It's a rite of passage for the photographer, you'll never leave the technician behind, but the technician will, clear the stage, get the sound set, and allow the performer or the artist to do their thing. And it's just a time of life thing. It's a point in the journey.
I remember one of the comparisons, David, used to be made with artists, and it was said, well, artists never get really they're not so het up about their brushes. It's just a tool of the trade. And then I met an artist and I talked to them about this, and they said, no, I have a particular set of brushes that when I go on holiday, that's the only thing I put in the safe. So they do obsess about their gear as well. Here's one. What role does failure play in creativity? Is it important to fail?
Yes.
And inevitably, at some stage, you might.
You will, absolutely. If you're not failing, you're not risking. There are very few things that I will be prescriptive about or, sort of definitive about. But if you are not failing, you are not risking, you are not taking chances. And I would venture to say you're not learning, which is how you then move on and take more risks, take more chances, fail again. Failure is our greatest teacher. I mean, my life is one failure after another. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, and I don't mean it in a self-flagellating sense. I like to think that when I fall down and pick myself up, I don't just go, oh, well, how did that happen? I don't know. Let's move on. I look back and go, oh, well, I probably shouldn't have tripped on the thing, or I should have tied my shoelaces. I've been bankrupt and divorced. I've got my leg cut off. I mean, I have gone to all of these things as a result of my choices. I like to think that I can look back at these things and go, oh, okay, yeah, I was a bit of a moron when I did that, or my understanding was a little anemic at the time. And now I've learned, I've found that missing piece. again, it's not a woe is me, I am a worm, I'm stupid. I mean, those are different things. Actual failure, when you all it means is you tried something and the first time it didn't work out. How many things do we do in life that they work out the first time? I mean, artists sketch things, they rehearse things. Every discipline in the arts has some version of, I'm going to go to the place where I'm free to just absolutely suck at this. I did 12 years in comedy, so I'm quite familiar with things like open mic nights. Everyone needs the freedom to have a place where they can just bomb and then go, okay, why did I bomb? Because that joke really, it felt like it was going to be good, but okay, my timing was off, or it was the setup was a little too long. I didn't get to the punchline quickly enough, or that one word, I just changed. Comedians, I mean, you've never, talking about, painters that like their brushes. Comedians, of course, don't get excited about microphones, but they are neurotic about the sentences that they write. And yes. I mean, they will record their sets, and they will listen to and track laughs per minute. And they're very analytical.
Wow.
But that's how a set goes from absolute rubbish to, so there's a Seinfeld episode, sorry, not a Seinfeld, it's Jerry Seinfeld, not the show. He did a special, and I think it's called Live on Broadway. It is the culmination of him returning after the Seinfeld show and doing a whole new set. And he didn't just write it and go to Broadway. He spent time going to all these clubs, and you can see that. There's a documentary called Comedian, and he wrestles with these jokes and what makes a thing funny. And you cannot get there without failure. You cannot get from a night that I wonder if to brilliant without, oh my God, this is completely tanking, it's all wrong, what was I thinking, to, oh, okay, that bit's good, the rest needs to go, to another rewrite, to, hey, it's starting to show promise. Like it's very iterative. Everything between A to Z is failure. It may not all be the same degree of failure, but we need to stop looking at failure as a personal, it's not like we failed, it's just the thing failed and our effort needs refinement. So I've learned to be less fearful of failure because it has no reflection. The only thing that has a reflection on me is if I fail and then I don't learn from it. I think that would be the real mistake, because then I don't have the chance to turn it, it doesn't get redeemed into something great.
Should you also find things difficult to eventually be successful? And again, I'm not talking. I'm not referring to I must be a struggling artiste, otherwise I will never find out what it means to be successful. There's a line in what's that lovely ball game film with the women's team during the war.
A League of Their Own.
League of Their Own, and there's a lovely line in it where one of the girls is saying, I can't play on Jimmy. Jimmy was the coach, wasn't he? Played by who was Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks. He was the coach, wasn't he? And there's a lovely line, and she's wanting to leave the ball team, and she says, I can't go on, Jimmy. I can't do this. It's too hard. And he says, it's supposed to be hard. The hard is what makes the success even better. That struggle to one day be as good as you feel you should be. Is it necessary to be a struggling artist? I think that was a question.
Yeah. It's not, I mean, most often when we talk about a struggling artist, we talk about their ability to put food on the plate. So let's separate the commerce from the craft. If we're just talking about, if we replace the word struggle and hardship with the word challenge, which I think is the same thing, except one's a positive spin and one's a negative spin. One carries sort of this weight of, oh, woe is me, and the other is a thing to aspire to. And I would say that, yeah, challenge is important. If it's not challenging, why are you doing it? If it's like, to me, that's the creation of tchotchkes and kitsch, and that's the realm of, it's purely the realm of craft. It's paint by numbers. And if that satisfies you, that's fine. There could well be vast communities of paint by numberers, but that's not what I'm after. For me, it's the challenge is important. So yeah, it should be hard. The challenge is what leads us into new places. If it's not challenging, it's not new. You've done it before. Why repeat yourself? Does it have to be unnecessarily hard? No. We pick our challenges. We pick the best ones, and Yeah, it needs, for me, it needs to be challenging. Otherwise, someone once said to Picasso, do you know what your work is going to look like before you've painted it? And Picasso said, no, if it did, I wouldn't, why would I paint it? For him, it was an act of exploration. And I think that exploration is, again, another way of looking at challenge, is taking you into new territory, a place you've not been before, which is why there's so much uncertainty, which is why we're afraid, which is why we sometimes fail. But it's not a bad thing. It's just the thing. And it is what it is, which I used to hate it when people said that. But increasingly, it's just a recognition of this is the nature of reality, and new things will sometimes, often, or always be hard. For me, they're always hard. But maybe that's just because I was the stupid kid and I always had to learn things the hard way, Neil. I don't know. But I do know that the things I take the most joy in, and the things that are most rewarding, and the work that I look back on as the strongest, is always an element of challenge. It's not good because it was challenging necessarily. Some things, they're really challenging, and I think that's important. Is it's not good just because it was really hard to do, but often that it was really hard to do gets you to a place where you're creating better work. And if you're not, you're probably learning something which will get you to a place where you're doing better work.
That might bridge well, actually, to this question. What do you say, and I'm sure you have faced this question many times, what do you say to the photographer who feels they've lost their voice, or their pictures have become repetitive, they've lost their mojo, this isn't working, I want it so much, David, but I can't find it again, it's gone?
I would say, see the previous question. I think you need to introduce challenge to your work. I think photographers that are in a rut, there's so many different words we can use for this. They're spinning their wheels, they're in a rut, they're bored. Bored photographers make boring photographs. You need to challenge yourself. You need to get out and try things that are going to push you to be the photographer that you're becoming, push you to abandon old forms, push you to take some risks. And that, I think, alone, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's challenging, but challenge leads to flow. That's how you're going to get into that position where you're out of the rut. If you're driving and you're in a rut, the only way to you got to steer really hard to one. So you're not going to accomplish anything by going in the same direction. You got to jump those ruts. And I have found challenge does that. And that's where voice is a funny thing, because it's always, every day it's a new thing. If you are growing as a photographer, your voice is growing. And it's not just, I found my voice one day back in the 80s, or for the younger audience who, back in the early 2000s, I found my voice this one time. And well, okay, but that was back in the early 2000s. That was that photographer. The photographer you are now will have a different voice. And are you constantly refining it, constantly discovering it, seeing where it leads? It's not easy. And I wonder if the people that feel stuck and bored just haven't jumped that rut and tried something new and challenged themselves. And for that, you have to reevaluate your relationship with failure and risk and all of these hard things. But it's just photography. For God's sakes, we're not curing cancer here. The repercussions of screwing up when you try a new thing are only that you won't immediately see success, and that it may take a little longer to get there. But if you're listening, you'll learn, and then you will make the new thing and you'll do it well. Any answer to that question is going to be messy. Any answer to that question is going to require something of us. But just try something new. It's Jim Watterson, I don't know if we've talked about him before, but the cartoonist that did Calvin and Hobbes, he just ended his career. One day he just said, I'm done.
Yeah, I remember it.
There was a lot of kind of stuff leading up to it, but there was a point at which he just said, I'm done. And when he was asked about it, he just said, I feel like I'm mowing the same patch of grass. Yeah. If you feel like I don't know where I was going with that, but if you feel like you're starting to repeat yourself, you have a couple options. You can either stop, or you can do something different. And in Watterson's case, he just did something different. And if you look at his comic strip and the evolution of it, it's clear that he became more and more enamored of watercolor painting, and he still paints. He's a successful painter. Yeah. He's just not painting Calvin and Hobbes anymore, and so he's done something different. And the cartoonist or the artist that he is now is very different than the one he was 30 years ago. So I imagine he would agree that there's nothing There's nothing that we do that isn't fraught with challenge and newness if we want it to be. But sometimes you got to just jump the ruts.
I want you to look out into our imaginary audience, which is, by the way, not full of me.
Okay.
And
right.
the light has just fallen on a young lad or young lass that's got up.
Okay, brilliant.
And they're right at the start, or they're hoping to be right at the start of their career. And they've heard, unfortunately, that because they've spoken, like I have, to a lot of photojournalists of late, conflict photographers that were posted in places that you or I might not find so palatable. And they've been told that there's no money in it anymore because the pictures on the desk are all being taken by people on the ground who just send along something that's come out of their iPhone. What would you say to that person? Is photography as an industry a much harder territory now?
Yes. It is a much harder territory. Times have changed, tastes have changed, demand has changed. However, this is very much a case of, whenever I see a headline that says, photography is dead, it's very much a case of, the king is dead, long live the king. History is full of people that have done things in remarkable areas creatively that had you told me that there would be a space not only for one, but in fact 5 Sharknado movies, I would have scoffed at the idea. Had you told me that there was a space to make millions of dollars on adult coloring books, I would have told you you were crazy. There are photographers and creatives of all sorts that are doing work in niche areas that are so true to who they are that you or I would never think about filling that space. And yet for them, it's not only natural, but it's inevitable. And if you can find an underserved niche and be true to yourself, I don't want to say it's a guarantee that you will make a living. It's just always hard, but there are ways to do it. There are ways to open spaces that you alone can fill. And I just think you need to think well outside the box of what once was traditional photography. To print up business cards that say have camera will travel and hope that the phone will ring is just lunacy, because everyone has a camera and will travel. Everyone, even people who wouldn't say they're photographers. So how can you take this tool that you have learned to use and create something that people want, that adds value to this world? Maybe you're a natural born storyteller. Maybe you're creating photographic art that goes on walls. And there are people that are making good livings out of this. But yes, it's hard. There are many more people that aren't. But if you go into it and you think, oh, well, stock photography is easy, I'll do that. Well, stock photography was not easy even back when it was a viable thing. It was a lot of work. As a model, it's dead now. There is no value, generally speaking, in stock photography. And if there is, and I'm speculating, but if there is, it's with those that are serving an underserved niche, not just putting their stuff out and hoping that because you can make a sharp and well-exposed photograph that the world wants it. No, they don't. So you have to ask, what can I make that the world wants? What are they hungry for? They're still hungry for story. They're still hungry for beauty. They're still hungry for all of the things we've always hungered for. You just have to find a way to deliver that. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what your unique skill set is or to whom you bring value, but you could be a photographer working in conservation that makes a decent living because you are also a biologist and you also specialize in the lemurs of Madagascar, and you somehow figure out how to, but it's going to be an underserved niche, not I'm a photographer, I know how to use a camera, because everyone knows how to use a camera. Everyone knows how to do it.
We've mentioned a few films now, and I'm thinking of Mel Brooks' voice in Robots. Do you remember Robots?
I don't. I remember Mel Brooks, but I don't.
It was a cartoon, and there was this character in it called Big Weld, and he was in charge of all the toy making. and he would say, find a need, fill a need, which is effectively what you've said.
Yes, it's every business model. And I think this is where photographers and artists in general can go wrong, is they forget that your craft and your commerce are two separate things. They're two separate skill sets. And if you're talking about commerce, you need a business plan that has a well thought out business model. And no business model in the world does not include the idea of here's the value that we provide to the people, that because nobody puts money into a thing they don't value, that they're not getting something out of. So what are you providing? And if you can't clearly answer that, you have a hobby, you don't have a business plan. So I think that's a lot of words to say, find a need, fill a need. Absolutely.
How are you feeling? Can we do some more questions?
Absolutely, yeah.
Close the doors. We're having a lock-in. Do photographs need to be original to be valuable? Or can repetition still carry meaning?
Wow.
1,001 pictures of the same place.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The question is to who? Who will find these repetitive photographs valuable on an individual scale? There is no shortage of photographer that wants to go to Venice and stand in the same place and make the same photograph, in part because it represents something to them, as they've seen that photograph. It's a thing of beauty. And if they could just do that, it would mean that they have, maybe achieved a certain level in their craft that they could pull it off. Or it's just, they saw that picture when they were a kid and they were like, I want to be there. And the picture is it's a receipt that they've got in their hand, says, I went to that place, I finally got there. And I think there's great value in that. I think there's great value in the pictures that no one will ever see, that are only just a memory for ourselves or represent a milestone in our growth as a craftsman. In the world out there does, I think, on some level value originality. But I think we need to define our terms. Does originality mean it is different and unique, or does it have a focus on the place from which it originates, which is the photographer itself? Does it have a voice? Is it distinct and unique as that person's work? That's how I define for myself originality. It originates with me. I'm less interested in the pursuit of it's different than what someone else has made, because I don't care what other people are doing with their art. I mean, I do in the sense that I experience it and it resonates with me, but I'm not looking at their art as the measure of what I should do with mine. I once rode my bike into the back of a parked car, and I did it because I was looking somewhere I shouldn't have been looking. And if you look where you're trying to go, you will inevitably steer your bike in the right direction. If you're always looking over your shoulder at what others are doing, purely in the hope of doing something that they are not, well, there's millions of photographers. How can you always be doing something different than what that cannot be our true north. Our true north has to be our longing, our curiosity, our desire, our opinions, the whole mess that is us. And then we make something, and hopefully we have enough understanding of the history of our art that we're not reinventing the wheel every damn time. But let's say you do. Let's say you go to Afghanistan and you find a beautiful young girl who's got a fierce gaze in her eye, and she's got a shawl that, the colors work with the background, and you create something vaguely, if not very, very, very reminiscent of Steve McCurry's portrait of Sharbat Gula, the Afghan girl.
Yeah.
Is it without any merits that because it's already been done, or do you combine it with something? Is there something that you have brought to the table that makes it distinctly your own? Again, questions that are probably more important than the specific answer. That you get a yes or no out of this is less important than that you explore that question. Does it scratch the itch? Does it satisfy you to do what thousands of photographers have done before? Or are you looking to do something that's uniquely your own, and more and more increasingly uniquely your own? Because I think this is a journey, and we don't all just arrive there and are doing work that's completely different. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. And if I made that portrait, Steve McCurry's influence is somewhere in the background. And as is every photographer I've ever looked at. Could I make my own version of that? Sure. And would it be an homage? Maybe. Would it be I don't know. That's a very fuzzy answer to your question, but I do think the questions are worth exploring, and you need to ask yourself as a photographer, how important is that to you? It's really important to me that I follow my own compass heading. It's less important to me that my work is specifically different than someone else, unless, of course, I'm just copying it, which, I would try very hard not to do. But I'm usually not looking at other people's stuff. I learned my lesson. I broke my teeth when I ran my bike into that car.
Well, I'm glad you said that bit, that you're usually not looking at other people's work. I wonder whether, I'm not so sure this is a question, more perhaps a suggestion, that you shouldn't spend so long looking at other people's work. Maybe wean yourself off looking at Instagram and doom scrolling through other people's stuff and deciding that yours is not as, or you just need to copy them to be as good as them and get as many likes.
Yeah.
How much time could we invest in looking at other people's? But at the same time, though, I love going to galleries, and I've developed over the last couple of years in particular a real love for photo books, and I don't want to put those down.
No, and I don't either. And I spend far too much money on photo books myself. God help the next person that has to move us out of this house, because they could be carrying 1,000 pounds of books down that spiral staircase. There is a big difference experientially between scrolling on Instagram, which is I think a platform that is so hostile to photography. It's not even passive; it's just hostile, and I'm on it so reluctantly every day. I'm like, why am I on this? I'm on it because I like the connection, and that's my answer. But it's not the place to appreciate or learn from good photography. It's cropped very specifically for Instagram, and it gives preference to images that play big, so it's just the wrong medium.
What's the right medium?
Well, as you said, going to art museums, buying photo books, studying, not scrolling. There's such experientially, when we scroll, we give it so little attention, and what we're doing is relying on that first reaction. Oh, I like this, click like, or I don't like it, scroll past, and it's very knee jerk. It's very disrespectful, frankly, to this as an art. And if you're a student, you should be standing. It would be a missed opportunity to not be going to a gallery and standing in front of work that has endured. If I go to Venice, I have a favorite photography gallery there called Treocchi, that is a beautiful gallery. They always got great shows, and I will spend an afternoon going from image to image, and just at no point in that context am I thinking about likes and follows or scrolling away to see what people have said about my stuff. Like, oh, another like, another comment, I'm so engrossed in it, and I'm feeling it, and I'm asking myself, if I'm thinking about myself at all, what is it in this work that's missing in mine? What feeling? How could I take something of this genius and learn from it? I think context is everything. And it's the same way if I've got a coffee or a glass of whiskey and I'm pouring over the latest photography book that I've got. There's something about the turning of the pages and the attention that you give it. I'm a huge fan. I tell all my students, you got to study the masters. You've got to know what's been done to know what's possible. You have to follow them, learn about their lives. This is important. And every serious student of their own art does this. They understand who has painted what in the past and what's worked. And they will look at the way Vermeer used color, or the way Rembrandt used light, or the way Elliot Erwitt as a photographer used juxtaposition. And they will not run out and try to emulate it necessarily, though they might as a study, but they will appreciate suddenly the value of juxtaposition and the way that it can tell a story or evoke a laugh. And that might sneak. I'm a huge fan of Elliot Erwitt. You would never look at my work and go, yeah, you can see Erwitt all over that. No. Oh my God, I wish. But no, I appreciate it. I learn from it. I think I'm much more attuned to juxtaposition. But that was so uniquely his own thing. All I can do is learn from it and go, oh, okay, maybe one day I'll see something of that genius in, the influence of him in my work. So I think it's important. I really think it's important, but I do think context I think it matters. I think if we just jump to social, that's a very poor way of interacting with the work that's been done by incredible artists of every visual, I mean, not just photography. We can learn so much from painting and all of the visual arts in terms of it elicits a response emotionally. Why do I feel that way? What was it about the composition, the scale, the color use, what it's all there. You can see it. It's not magic. What was it? And then figure that out. And again, maybe you don't get an immediate answer, but you stew on the question, and that informs your work.
It's the Photo Walk of a Friday. Back with David duChemin shortly. If you'd like to send in some pictures, some stories, as we're back with the Mailbag show next week, then I'd love to hear from you. Send to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures in, 2,500 pixels wide, if you can optimize them. Otherwise, don't worry, I'll do the heavy lifting. Next year is going to be a real adventurous year, a year where we explore with our cameras visits to Scotland, India, Mongolia and Venice. And if you'd like to be a part of our journeys beyond, then I'd love to hear from you. If you go to the website, at the top of the website, along the menu, you'll find all the places we're going to. And that'll take you to our Journey Beyond website, where you can apply to be a part of those adventures. And with only a couple of months left until Don't Say It, Neil, what do you think I was going to say? Until Don't Say It, Neil, until, that truck with all the lights on from Coca-Cola, until that time of year, then I'm looking for your picture from 2025, which has been your big picture. I think we managed to escape without saying the you-know-what word. So what picture has been your one? The one is the feature that I'm running, and I'd like you to send me your picture that's been your big capture from 2025. Now, I know you may be thinking, hang about, Neil, I've got a couple of months yet. In which case, hang on a bit longer. But for anybody else who thinks, I've got that picture, then I'd love to hear from you. Now is the time to send it in. Normal rules of engagement, 2,500 pixels wide. All the rest is on the show page for the one on photowalk.show. Good luck. I'd like to see what's been your big picture of the year. Now, for 10 of those who send your pictures in, I'd very much like to invite you onto the show, the first show of 2026, to talk about your picture and a little more about your photography. So over to you, as they say. Right, back for the final part of my conversation today with David duChemin, after which, and before today's PS, you'll hear the Playout song, a song to make a few more pictures as you think about what's been said today. There's been a lot said. As usual, I invite you to leave a comment on the comments part of the show page. I'd love to read what you have to say about the shows and your thoughts following the shows. But today's Playout song is from Samo. Wonderful song. It's called Home, and that will follow my conversation, the last part of my chat with David today.
Let's talk about the word story. Does everything have a story? Does everything need to be or have a story? I often joke, David, on the show about how things like the humble blueberry muffin on an Instagrammer's grid, they talk about it having a story. When I think, no, it doesn't. It's a blueberry muffin.
You're absolutely right. It's overused, and I would argue that it's understood, because not everything has story. A beautifully lit photograph of a blueberry may elicit feelings and thoughts and hunger in me. It may be a beautiful illustration for a cookbook, but no, it doesn't have story. But that doesn't necessarily make it less a photograph. Blueberry muffin with a cockroach crawling on it, that has story.
Oh yes.
But is that a better photograph? Well, it elicits different feelings.
Yeah.
But much Rothko, for those that you can Google this, for those that don't know Rothko, look at a painting by Rothko. Does that have story? No, I don't even think Rothko would argue that it has stories. He's painting color fields, and yet it has emotion. And most people that look at a Rothko that I have talked to can be deeply moved by color alone. Is it more of a poem? And do poems always tell a story? Certainly they do not. Some do, but some don't. Many don't. So I think we have deified this idea of story, and most photographers, I'm going to go out on a limb here, most photographers that put visual storyteller on their card couldn't tell you what the basic elements of story are. They really don't know. They look at a picture and, it's got so much story. Does it? Could you break it down for me? Tell me why this has story and what the elements are, and they would be hard pressed to do so. Story is important, but just because you take a picture and you like it doesn't mean it has story. Nor does it mean because it doesn't have story that it's not powerful and evocative. It may just not do that thing. That's okay.
What elements does a story have to have then?
If you go all the way back to, for us, grade 12 English class, there's the class who, what, when, where, why, and how, or it has character, it has setting, it has conflict. The classic conflicts in literature would be man versus himself, and man versus nature. Something has to be implied to happen. There has to be something at stake. Someone has to win something or lose something. So will one photograph tell a whole story? Not necessarily, but it can imply it, and it can take. The reason story works is because we care about character. We resonate with conflict. And so in a still photograph, what can you say about the setting? What can you say about the character? It may not have story, like big picture story, but it may have elements of story that make it powerful. I contend that classic conflict in literature, some pictures have it. War photographers are a great example. There's visible conflict, which is why we call them conflict photographers. But what about the rest of us? Well, you can have conflict. And I think that's where contrast comes in. I think that's where juxtaposition comes in. You have ideas of old versus young, of inorganic versus organic, of big versus small. These implied, it's sort of a versus, right? A big shark versus a small fish. It has implied contrast. It has contrast. It has implied conflict. And it makes you go, because something's going to happen now and something's unresolved. So, I have a whole course called Image Story, and it's based on the idea of storytelling. So it's hard to put into a soundbite, but there is a lot there. And if you don't have at least a working knowledge of some of these ideas, I question the ability to put it into a single photograph or even a body of work, 12 images, 24 images that tell a story if you can't tell me what a story does.
Well, when you're out making your pictures, I'm looking at the bear that we've discussed before behind you. You know the picture very well on the stony beach by. Where is that, by the way? Is that?
It's in northern British Columbia.
Northern British Columbia. There's a story to that. I would imagine you found a story in that picture of that bear. You've got a low camera angle. You're showing it in a very powerful way. It's also a very soft picture, though. I don't mean that focally.
No.
I mean that in the
palette is soft.
Yeah.
The light is soft.
Yeah.
And I would say that the story here, it's a story only partly told, but it has to do with the character in the character's setting. Would it be stronger if that bear had a salmon in its mouth? I think so. There's implied action, there's change, something is at stake. Now there's an additional character. It's nature versus nature kind of thing. So there are different strengths of stories. There are different kinds of stories. And again, what I would go back to is the reason some stories work so well is because of the power of the elements themselves and the fact that these are things as humans that we care very much about and understand. And so a photograph doesn't necessarily tell a whole story, but it can imply story. It can set you up to, and this is where I think it's brilliant with photography, it can set you up to tell the rest of the story in your head. It's unresolved. And so you have questions and you're like, okay, what's going to happen now? What's the bear looking at? That to me raises a question that creates a story in my head. So does a good photograph have story, or does it provoke story? maybe both. But again, not every photograph does either of those. A good poem does its own thing. It goes straight to the heart. It's like a Rothko. It goes straight there. Whereas a photograph with story is more like a J.W. Turner painting, where it's very poetic and it evokes all the emotions, but something is happening. There are people on the boat and the boat's going to crash, and there's more story there. But it gets to the same place. It gets to the, all the feels. It gets to the place where the hair stands up on the, on your forearms, and you feel something that you wouldn't have felt by looking at a blank piece of paper.
Do you, I wonder, does a photograph, let's take the picture of the bear actually, does a photograph say a lot about the photographer? Do we learn about a photographer for the photographs that she or he makes? Or is that a load of arty-farty old tosh?
It may be, but I hope it's also true. Does one photograph? Maybe no. Any more than a singer could do one song, and so like, does that one song? Can you really? Well, you might get hints. You could listen to Bruce Springsteen's "Born in the USA" and get a sense of how he feels about his country and the plight of the worker and that sort of thing. But it wouldn't be until you listen to all of his music and went, oh yeah, I think you can. I think you can tell a lot about someone like Monet by looking at all of his work and going, okay, I get it. Because he would not spend all of that time painting flowers if he did not deeply love flowers.
No.
Picasso would not have created what he created if he wasn't a certain kind of person. I think, yes, Escher, Dali, you look at anyone that has ever sung or painted or acted, Wes Anderson. Yeah, I think you can look at all of Wes Anderson's movies, and then you would sit down with Wes Anderson and you would not go, whoa, this guy is so different than I expected. You would learn, of course, some new things, but I think the person he is probably very consistent with the art that he makes. And I think, if you looked at all of my work and then sat down with me, you would probably go, yeah, that makes sense. He is that guy. As long as the photographer, I think, is revealing themselves and creating work that they really, truly are passionate about and have something to say about. It's possible to do a whole portfolio of kitsch that is just repetitive, that studies of things. And would you find anything out from those? Probably not. But I wouldn't call that art either. I would call it, those are studies. Those are the craft. Those are the things that we do to get better and eventually make the art. But you wouldn't judge an art student on their portfolio the way you would, I think, 40 years from the time they started creating, look back at it and go, okay, that's really revealing. I see much more of that person. So much depends on the artist. Much depends on their willingness to put their soul into their work.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, David. I really has. It's felt like a proper in-conversation one. You and I on the stage looking out at this imaginary audience that I was trying to paint. Just before,
it's horrifying, by the way, an entire audience that looks just like you and I. It really is. It's the only difference between them is one's wearing glasses and the other is not. So
we're back in John Malkovich land, aren't we? Before the management turn the lights on and kick us all out because they've got staff bills to pay, I'm wondering if there's one question. You're sitting there and you're thinking, right, well, nobody's asked me that. Is there a question that you've been disappointed not to have been asked? Maybe. Well,
I mean, I really miss the opportunity to talk about, what gear I'm using these days. No, what I love about this conversation is that it has, and maybe this is, it's both of our faults. It has centered on issues that are so distinct from one photographer to another that it has avoided the things that would take us into prescriptive conversations and has focused, I think, on issues that are how any photographer listening to this conversation will respond to it, how it will resonate will be very different. And I think that's a strength. I think our work needs to take us into new places, but not just for the sake of being new, but for the sake of taking us into places that are adjacent to who we are as artists and human beings as we grow and change. And none of that can be prescriptive. And it's going to be fraught with challenge and fear and the worry that we're not enough, that our art is derivative, and whatever other nonsense the critics are going to, what other words they're going to throw at our. Yeah, it may be that, but at least it's an honest go at creating something that's truly my own. We forget that we're only here for a short time, Neil. We forget that, we don't have infinite lives, that our days are numbered. And especially as you grow in your craft, as every year you get a little better at your craft, as another year you have less to use that craft and to say the things you want to say.
Goodness.
And be the person you're going to be. And this is the one thing I love about photography. It is about, not to steal the thunder, but the name of my latest book, Light, Space, and Time. These are not just the raw materials for photography. They're kind of what we have in life. That's what we've got. And what a waste it would be. What a missed opportunity to only work towards work that imitates others, that is that overlooks who we are, that only has technical merits going for it. It's sharp and well exposed. Because, at the end of the day, and I have probably said this in every conversation I've been a part of, at the end of the day, it will not be, if we're lying on our deathbed, if we have that luxury, we will not be looking at our blue ribbon photographs that won, this award or that award. We will be looking at images that are much more personal to ourselves, that did exactly what we wanted to, that held a memory, that froze time. It just were truly uniquely our own. We will not be worried about the ones that got all the likes on Facebook or in Instagram. We will not even be looking, we won't turn the picture over and hope that there are comments from others. The only thing that will matter is our memory and what we felt like we did with that photograph in that moment, what it reflects of our lives, maybe what it reflects back to us as people, as human beings that had that one crack at life. And in that context, some of the stuff that we obsess over as photographers, what kind of tripod? What's the best travel tripod? That's the question I wish to God you would ask me, Neil. What's the best travel tripod that I could buy on Amazon right now? If we could turn the clock back and just do a podcast about that, my God, that would be time well spent.
Far from all the things I left behind, I hear the call of restless skies, the dreams I couldn't chase, the moments I can face. The streets unfold into the night, and woven dreams escape my sight. The winds hum through the pines, a name that still entwines. The city is asleep, moonlight cut so deep, footsteps dragging slow, in cold air on my skin is pulling me back in. The silence starts to sing, I feel the stillness grow, surrender into light that pierces through the night. Far, 1,000 miles of stories told, and gravel paths of rust and gold. Yet still I hear the sound of roots beneath the ground. The city is asleep, moonlight cuts so deep, footsteps dragging slow, and cold air on my skin is pulling me back in. The silence starts to sing, I feel the stillness grow, surrender kisses through the night.
And that's Samo with Home. And my thanks to David duChemin today for his second appearance on the show. I have a feeling he will be returning at some stage. So many more questions to ask. I hope you enjoyed that. It's a slight experiment in an idea that I've got for some live shows. Live shows, Neil, that sounds exciting. I know. Can you tell us more? No. Not because I don't want to, because it's still a live idea, as it were. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you'd like to walk a bit further together, then that's what the extra mile is all about. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you. It's a shorter length, reflective reflection, if that makes sense. Some thoughts as I return on a ship from New York. A few mentions for those who smooth the voyage for me. Oh, I've been waiting for a week where that makes sense, or how that word works out literally for once. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT. He can help you too, you know, if you like. Honestly, without him, I don't know where we'd be. My thanks also to Andrea Gilpin, who keeps a watchful eye over Instagram, as does Kelly Mitchell for Facebook. For Kelvin Brown, who's at the helm of the Flickr group, and to Michael Brennan, who compiles the music of the show onto a Spotify playlist. Right, a postscript for the show. Today it's from Destin Sparks. Now, he is an Australian landscape photographer born in Brisbane, Brizzy, known for his panoramic images of natural scenes and his commitment to traditional film photography. He often works actually with medium format, slide film, just to make life harder, rather than digital cameras, believing it captures light and colour in a more authentic way. It's pithy, this one, blink and you'll miss. Photography, he said, is the story I fail to put into words. See you next week, back with a mailbag.
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides. Thoughts can be cruel, they're not mine to hold. The space unravels when you let go.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.